Oh, okay. How about now? All right. Thanks for the signaling back there. I appreciate you. So my name's Yolanda Smith. We're going to be talking today about how we can build empathy amongst our product and our technology peers. For those that don't know me, this is my first time at NolaCon, but not my first time in New Orleans. So it's nice to be here, and I definitely appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you about this. So here's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to start off with a little bit of my favorite subject, me. I do like to joke around, and we'll talk a little bit more about a day in my life and kind of the things that I'm hearing from developers that I work with. Next thing we'll go into a little bit is talk about why is it that we're still seeing the same and hearing the same issues coming up from developer communities and from our product communities 20 years later, right? We're still seeing cross-site scripting. We're still seeing, SQLI. We're still seeing default passwords everywhere. It's not like we haven't been saying don't do it. So the question becomes, what are we not saying that we should be saying? And who are the people that we should be talking to instead? And then I want to play a little game with y'all folks. It's Saturday at 3 o'clock. I can't think of a better way to spend the day than to play a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to play a game called Dungeon Master of Engineering, if you've heard of that. And then finally, we're going to go through and talk through what I learned having gone through the same exercise that I'm going to put y'all through this afternoon. And then finally, we'll finish up with just the recommendations. Okay. So, again, my name's Yolanda Smith. I spent 8 years in the United States Air Force where I learned all my elite cyber skills. I joined the Air Force because I was interested frankly, the Air Force was the only service at the time that was taking cyber warfare and cyber operations seriously. And they were nice enough to actually let me do it for 8 years, and I had the chance to work on some pretty interesting projects and programs on non-traditional platforms, including the Predator weapon system. But what they say in the Air Force is that when you aren't having any more fun, then you should stop doing it. So that's exactly what I did, and I decided to take my Texas self and move from San Antonio up to Boston, where I became a product manager at a cybersecurity company called Pony Express. See some head nods out there. I see a couple of alumni out there too. So it says recovering for a reason. That is a hard job, y'all. Product managers are responsible for listening to the market, listening to data, listening to our engineering team, listening to what the board wants. Our job is to listen and take all of those data feeds and that feedback and turn it into something that can actually help a customer solve a problem. In doing that, I had the opportunity to talk with a lot of larger companies. One of those companies happened to be Target. And in talking with Target, the CISO pulled me aside and said, "Hey, what's your long-term game plan?" And I said, "Well, I want your job, sir." And he was like, "Well, if you want my job, then you got to come work where I work." And so that's how I landed in Minneapolis. So I took my Boston accent, I picked my R's back up, threw them back into the chowder, and made my way over to Minneapolis, where I am today. So in my role as an InfoSec analyst at Target, one of the many things I get to do is work with developers, specifically looking at Target.com and our mobile platforms. So when you log into Target.com, you're going to hit something like 1.8 million web pages that are generated over time, or in a matter of 4 seconds. Each of those web pages is something that I've had a conversation with a developer, maybe not 1.8 million conversations, but how they happen. I've had a conversation with a developer, a product manager, a business analyst. Somewhere, somebody's asked me about, "Hey, is this site secure? Is this site safe?" You might have heard about a little thing that happened to Target a few years ago. Rest assured, I was not there when that happened. It did not impact the website, and frankly, I will say that Target has learned quite a lesson and has built an elite team around making sure that doesn't ever happen again. So, that being said, we are a team made up of people. And one of the things that I hear amongst our developer teams that I work with is, they get a finding, and that finding is something along the lines of, "Hey, you have a bad cert," right, serving up your application. And routinely, I'll get what I call the Narnia defense. It's a made-up place. It's a made-up thing. You're just going to tell me whatever you have to tell me to get me out of your face, right? So I get well, that's handled someplace else, downstream, upstream, some place that I don't know, but it's not my fault and I don't want to talk about it, right? That's the Narnia defense. The other thing I hear a lot is, where does it say we have to do that, right? That's the willful ignorance defense, right? Where I know that you took your information security awareness training. I know that you went through and you saw that the CIO said thou shalt do, but because it's not written in front of you right now, it somehow means that you don't have to do that. So I call that willful ignorance. The other one I hear quite a bit is what I call the complete abject denial and delusion, where we say, is this really that big of a problem? What's the likelihood that somebody's ever going to figure out that if they type in that exact string of characters on our guest-facing web page, that it's going to lead to a DOM-side cross-site scripting attack? All of those things have happened. They happen fairly regularly. And when I talk to my peers who are looking at other aspects of Target's ecosystem, our common feedback that we give to them is, okay, sure, Jan. And it's because we all know, the folks in this room all know, that hackers don't care. They don't care if it's something small. They don't care if it's something big. They don't care if you can make a case to the business. It's going to get exploited, and then it's going to get pivoted, and it's going to turn into something else, right? But the fact that 20 years later, I'm not going to date myself and say the first time I heard that the cross-site scripting was a bad thing, but some number of years ago, we started saying, hey, stop putting default passwords. Stop using password 1234556. Stop running everything as root and start using principle of least privilege. And yet we're still seeing, even today, that in 2018 the most common password was password 123456. Even today. And we're still seeing breaches where, someone has full plain text passwords exposed and sitting in S3 buckets, right? We haven't necessarily changed the threat. We've changed where it lives. Now it lives in the cloud instead of on a desktop. So we're saying the same things. It's the same threats and the same issues are ending up in different places, which leads me to ask the question, are we not saying it right? Are we saying it the wrong way? Are we not using the right language? Are we not saying, are we not talking to the right folks? Are we the baddies in this narrative? Are we the ones that are the problem? I think we might be part of the problem. I don't think we're the whole problem. And just like I've already said, we've seen that we've gone from waterfall to agile and we've gone from local development to serverless operations, and yet we're still having issues where people have the ability to very quickly do privilege escalation and things like that. But why is that? When you start to look at what's actually happening to allow that to go on and try and pull together, well, security says this. There's plenty of guidance where security says don't do it this way. But then when you look at the developer communities and the docs and things like that, sometimes it's contradictory, sometimes it's vague, sometimes it's outdated or condescending. And I don't know about you, but if you spent a long time working on something and then somebody comes along at the 11th hour and tells you it sucks, it's wrong, do it again, you're probably going to throw up some walls, right? So I think that defensiveness, that innate, that desire just to get something done and we'll figure out the security later, it comes from that basis of not necessarily having a good relationship to begin with and not necessarily speaking the same language to begin with. The other thing that I find is that because we're so busy, and particularly in security, playing catch up, that the security tools and metrics and blinky boxes and funny lights and all these things that we have end up being built around the product because the product's already out. It's already been fielded, and now we have to get it from prod and figure out how to secure it, while it's live, right? So now we've got all of the SaaS products and all of the antivirus and EDRs and all these things and to add around the product and report back out to our CISO, but none of that stuff actually feeds into the product, nor does it actually help the product become successful or do what it's designed to do. So I think maybe we're still making this too hard. I think that we could figure out ways to communicate differently to our developer teammates and to our product teammates. And just to give you an example of how we might be making this too hard, this incident happened fairly recently. We had a developer that got a task to fix an issue with method override. So I'll just read what he says for if you can't see it in the back. He said, "We got a finding about method override, but the recommendations in the report weren't useful, so I decided to do some independent research to see if I could figure it out. I ended up even more confused, and I still don't know how to prevent method override abuse. I feel like I wasted valuable time." So with my product manager hat on, I can tell you that the KPI there for product managers is revenue. The KPI for developers is time. I want to go faster. I want to have quality code, and I want to be able to deliver it in a way that's going to be resilient, easy to service and maintain. So when I heard this person say, "I wasted valuable time," it was like he told me that he was pushed out of a moving car, and then the car backed up and ran over him, and then, they spat on him a little bit. I mean, that's a gut punch, right? That means that he was not able to do the core thing that he's able to do, and that's to maximize the use of his time. So, and I'm going to actually pick apart the real finding that he got. This came from an automated DAS scan. What he was looking for is a concise explanation of why method override is a problem, and what methods are considered dangerous, and really where he should be looking to fix it, right? So if you don't know what method override is, it's just a condition where you have the ability to take verbs like put and patch and delete and actually go beyond just the get and post verbs that are natively there in HTTP. There's a really good valid reason why you might want to use put and patch and delete, right? In our particular case, we needed to be able to give guests the ability to modify their reviews. And we wanted to give guests the ability to delete reviews if they wanted to. However, this showed up as a high finding in his DAS report. For us at Target, a high finding gets the attention of some very high-level senior leaders, right? If it's not resolved, if it doesn't look like anyone's taking action, it's actually going to get up to the CISO's attention. So when he sees this, he wants to fix it and fix it now and get it off of his plate, move on to something else in his backlog. But when we look at the actual verbiage in the finding, it said this. So attackers may bypass server protection against dangerous HTTP verbs using override techniques. Well, that's not so bad. That's pretty straightforward. I get that. But then the next piece it says is the attack works by using trusted HTTP verbs such as get or post, but adds request headers such as X HTTP method, X HTTP override, or X method override to provide a restricted verb such as put or delete. Doing so will force the request to be interpreted by the target application using the verb in the request header instead of the actual HTTP verb. In certain cases, the restricted verb may also be used in the query or post parameters instead of a request header. Now, what in the F does that mean? Like, I mean, just think about this as if you hadn't gotten used to seeing DAS reports, and this was maybe the first time you're having to deal with method override abuse. Where would you know to fix that issue? What would be the first step you would take? Do you fix it in the override in the headers? Does that solve it across the board? Do you fix it at the CDN? Do you fix it at your API gateway? Where do you go about actually resolving this issue? And then if you do all of that, does that actually solve the problem? Because now it looks like I have to look at query parameters too. So now I've taken this developer's time and I've said, okay, I want you to go off and actually go do a research project on method override. So I will tell you that this particular developer is now in his team the method override expert. He knows all about method override. But I would think that we shouldn't have had to have him do all of that in order to help him solve his problem. So I think that our language in security is a little bit out of sync with what's going on in the business and with our technology partners. So when we talk about sort of who should be involved in this conversation, I think it's important to understand how our language is coded, right? In security, we talk about things like attack and defense and vulnerabilities and findings and RA and Sun Tzu and take a hill. Listen, I was in the military. I know all about that. I can do acronyms with the best of them. But we don't do anything in the military, like what we do in cybersecurity with all of the sort of fake militarisms that we like to apply to things, right? We're talking about computers here, y'all. It's serious. It can have real impacts, but let's keep some perspective here, all right? On the other hand, within the product space, they're obviously concerned about revenue. So the language that you hear a lot and the way it's coded is around competition and cost of goods and the total addressable market. I want to understand, if I've built this product, how many people is it going to apply to? Who's the likely buyer? When are they going to be able to actually make a buying decision? What happens if there's a problem? I want to understand who my competition is in terms of service as well. So if another company has a better service offering in terms of like support and things like that, I want to make sure I get that as well. Pricing. I want to make sure that my pricing is comparable to what the market can stand. Obviously, I'm also interested in the funnel. And when I say the funnel, I'm talking about the actual buying process. That goes from how do I know that I have a prospective customer all the way down to how do I know that I have a customer that's going to be with me for 20 years, right? And that all feeds into my customer acquisition cost. If you're in a traditional sales organization, one of the things that you're going to be very concerned about is your customer acquisition cost, because you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get a lead and turning that lead into something, and that's going to be very, very expensive. Oftentimes, product managers are also concerned about risk as well, but not risk in the way that we describe it. It's usually risk in terms of cost-benefit analysis. And I know a lot of times in security, we sort of glaze over because we're like, that doesn't have nothing to do with anything that I care about. I just want you to stop using password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But when I put my product manager hat on, I have to be able to determine what exactly I'm going to have a developer go off and do, and what actual impact that's going to have on my product and my ability to get and retain more customers. That's what I care about. And that's not something that a lot of security folks that I've talked to are interested in hearing. That said, speaking of developers, the relationship between developers and product teams tends to be very close. And part of it's because they're using similar language, but part of it's also, too, that there's a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. On the product side, we obviously know that folks are concerned about the problem space. On the engineering side, they're much more concerned about the solution space, right? I don't really care necessarily that from the product perspective, I don't really care how you solve the problem, but the engineers have to care about that. They have to care they have to care about things like technical debt. They have to care about things like getting to market fast, making sure that the thing that they make can be serviced and maintained, and that it's resilient and that it fails over correctly. They have to care about things like churn. We have developers that have OKRs built around OKRs being outcomes and key results. Objectives and key results, sorry. We have developers that have OKRs built around their ability to actually push out quality code and get PRs accepted. So when we have this sort of sideline relationship with security that's not part of that conversation, that has a direct impact on developers' ability to actually deliver on those OKRs and those key results. So, now, what does an ideal relationship look like? Now, I don't know if this is the actual thing. I don't know if this is the actual Venn diagram of what it's going to look like. But you could see the case where we want everybody to be basically speaking the same language. And that could be that, everyone in product also knows everything about security. Everyone in security knows everything about product. Whatever that ends up being, we need to have folks at least having a basic understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve and what a win looks like for each of our communities. I think what we need to be aiming for is much more of a compromise. For me, I don't necessarily need to see the P&L as a security person, but I probably want to know what your revenue goals are around your product, because I also want to make sure that I have enough security built in to protect that revenue over the long haul. And we might say, what does a firewall have to do with building a product? Guess what? That product probably has to be delivered through your firewall, and your customers are probably going to have to access that product through your firewall. So we want to make sure that the firewall is appropriately tuned, and we're not using Bob's firewall from down the way that you got from, that was rolled, at 4 o'clock in the morning. We want to make sure that we're looking at really, really, really good quality stuff to protect that revenue stream. Similarly, engineers probably don't care about the total addressable market, but they obviously want to make sure that they are building a product that's going to serve the most use cases and cover the largest customer base possible. So that way they're not going off and having to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild and retune, right? And I should have said this from the beginning. Feel free to, raise your hand, participate. It's Saturday, y'all. This is gonna be long, if it's just me talking. So, hot take time. All right. So, here's what I think. The reason why I call this hot takes is because, frankly, you may violently disagree. You may flip a table over. You may throw a chair. Do not throw a chair at me. Do not throw a chair at me. I will throw it back. But this is what I believe to be true. I believe that if we're going to secure the business, we have to know the business. That means it's not just saying and paying lip service to the fact that, we should participate and work with our business pals and high five and go to the picnic at the end of the year. No, I mean we actually have to change the way we talk to each other. It means we have to change what we know about how the business works. I also think that you shouldn't need to be a security expert to build a secure product. That method override story broke my heart. It really did, because that developer lost an entire day trying to unpack what was, frankly, something that should have been very simple and straightforward. Now, is he better for it because he learned something? Sure, yeah. But when we're talking about being measured by how much code you can push and your velocity, we stole a day from him, and ultimately hurt him in terms of his performance. I also believe that security solutions should be part of the product. It should contribute to the success of the product. Big picture, if we're just making security things for security people, then what in the heck is the product for? Security is meant to be part of the overarching business, and it's meant to be part of what makes the product go. I think that when we talk about measuring a success in security, we should also be thinking about how that fits into the overall business's success. Jason Street in his keynote today talked about how we have to start, providing the pie charts and the numbers and the spreadsheets to senior leaders. That's part of the story that we need to tell. Absolutely. And security metrics are one of the ways that we can move forward in helping product teams build really good, strong products. All right. Enough of the pontificating. I think it's time to play a game. So, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So for those that didn't hear what he said, he was violently agreeing with me. All right. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate that. So let's talk about what this actually looks like. I'm going to actually show you a little bit about what a developer might do. I ran an experiment over the past 6 months. Actually, it was a 2-day experiment that that has started to evolve in terms of how I work with the folks at my day job, but I want to expose you to what that experiment looked like. So we're going to play Dungeon Master of Engineering. Okay. Here's a scenario. You're a full stack developer at a game retailer. The business wants to drive more interest in some of their less popular games and believes that they can do it by running a flash sale on both web and mobile platforms. Existing customers will get 10% off, while new customers will get 30% off. To truly distinguish the offer, it will be run as a pop-up sale, held almost entirely separately from the main sales funnel. Now, I'm hoping that with your security hats on, your hands are sweating, because mine certainly was when I was starting to type this, because, you know, I would be lying if I told you that it didn't happen in real life. It didn't happen at the place that I work right now, where we see that things just sort of pop up. They come from a hackathon, and all of a sudden they're in production. Oh, crap. Now what do we do, right? Somebody had a great idea on the Thursday right before Cyber Monday, and now we have to get it out the door, and it has to be secure. Oh, crap. So let's talk about what full stack developer is, so that we're all on the same page and what we expect from these folks when we actually go through this scenario. So an engineer, a full stack developer, and I love that the pronunciation is full stack. A full stack developer is an engineer who can handle all the work of databases, servers, system engineering, and clients. Depending on the project, what customers need may be a mobile stack, a web stack, or a native application stack. Now, in security, we shredded out our disciplines fairly granularly, right? We have folks that are security experts in databases. We have folks that are security experts in IoT and in web applications and in all these things. We are expecting developers to do all of it in mobile, in web, in native, in IoT, in push messages. They have to know how to get it from GitHub all the way out to GCP and beyond. So, here's our flash sale requirement, full stack developers. We want to build an app that covers both web and mobile, but we're going to focus on web for the sake of time. Our customers should be able to log into an existing account or register for a new account via our app. We need to be able to track the customer movements around the site, and we want to be able to suggest or promote new games and platforms on sister sites. But we're only going to use the existing payment patterns. So when they go to actually hit checkout, they're going to get punted back to our original site. Oh, and it has to be secure. So in terms of timing, time is 8 a.m. Thursday morning. This has to be live by 5 a.m. Monday morning. Yes, everybody's working overtime. But for the sake of this experiment, I want you to pretend for a second you don't know all that you know about security, right? We're going to pick a technology that is fairly easy to get into. We're going to use JavaScript. And it just so happens that JavaScript is quite ubiquitous in the web world. And we're going to confront security questions as they come up, because that's basically what developers have to do. That's what's happening for real. We may say, you got to design it secure from the beginning. But what's happening in reality is that folks are saying, oh crap, I got to figure out how long the password should be. This is already live. I have people that have already put 3-character passwords out there already. Crap. And the application itself has to be secure. It can't be an add-on. It can't be some blinky box that you throw on. That's the experiment. Okay. So we're going to build this together right now. Now I have put together. I just wanted you to see this gift. I thought it was so funny. I have put together a quick little Node app that hopefully won't break on me. All right, so here's our flash sale site. It's a quick little Node app. These are the games that we're going to sell. It's a very skeleton site. Basically, none of the back end works. But I want you to take a look at this, and from the perspective of the developer, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to hit send. And now here comes someone from security saying, "Oh, hey, what is this? What are you doing here?" So, throw out some questions. What are you concerned about immediately, security people? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're concerned about the database. Okay. Others? Well, what? Input validation. Okay. What else? For the record, none of that's in here. What else? Cookies. What about the cookies? Okay. So I'll tell you that this app, this is me with my Dungeon Master hat on, this app has been built on top of Firebase. Firebase is controlling it's running the underlying authentication service. What it's not doing any input validation. It's not doing any database validation. So it's the data that might go in there is not pristine. In terms of cookies and sessions, I haven't set any flags whatsoever. And in terms of the password length, it enforces a 6-character password. Now, what else are you concerned about? Anything? SQL injection? Okay. What else? All right. So if those are the things that we are concerned about, I'll tell you what everyone else is going to do. They're going to Google it, right? So I typed in, like what many developers have done, Node.js security for authentication. And here's the first thing that pops up. Your Node.js authentication tutorial is probably wrong. All right, sweet, awesome, amazing. So basically, what do I trust if the thing that I'm looking at is wrong? All right, well, how about learn how to handle authentication with Passport.js? All right, sweet, but it looks like, and hopefully my Wi-Fi works in here. It might not. It looks like, I'll just tell you what it was. There we go. One of the things that this thing recommends is that you turn on JSON Web Tokens. It doesn't tell you what to put in the web tokens, how to invalidate the web tokens, how to store the web tokens, where the web token, what should go in there, who should get access to them, what the roles should be. Those are the things that started making my hands sweat when I started seeing these tutorials. So, you know what's not showing up in here when I talk about password and security authentication? OWASP. That's the one thing that we tell everybody to go look at when they talk about, web application security. OWASP doesn't show up, really, not even in the top 5. So when we talk about why are developers doing what they're doing and why are we seeing the same issues that we're seeing, what we find is that we have a bunch of tutorials out there that are contradictory, that may not necessarily say the right thing, that are flat out wrong. And oh, by the way, the guidance that is given doesn't overlap really at all with the existing security guidance that's out there from sources that we in security trust, like OWASP, like NIST. All right. So I ran this experiment myself. I put together a quick little app just like I showed you. And one of the things that I had to really think through is what trade-offs was I going to make in terms of security. So here's what I ended up with. This was my security coverage map. I was concerned about login and registration, concerned about profile management, session management, my APIs, as well as delivery. So when I went and I looked for those specific things on Google for Node.js applications, these were my primary sources. Now these numbers you're seeing here on the far right is what the actual coverage is with sources that we would trust in security. So this 25% is the high watermark of coverage between OWASP. So what I'm saying here is that of all of the OWASP recommendations, there was 25% coverage of those recommendations in this source. Similarly, in the profile management one, there was absolutely no coverage, meaning that OWASP didn't have a recommendation, or the recommendation wasn't covered at all in the tutorial. Furthermore, as we get down the road, you can see that CORS was pretty good. OWASP said everything that my CORS tutorial also said. CORS being cross-origin resource sharing. So that was really, really neat. I appreciated that, and I trusted that. But I couldn't trust any of my other sources. So how do I know that what I built is actually secure? That's what developers are asking. This wasn't easy. It was not an easy exercise. I gave myself 48 hours to do exactly what I asked you to do in 5 minutes. My biggest concern was figuring out whether or not I could trust my sources and whether or not I had implemented my guidance sufficiently. The other pieces I saw was that very first link that you saw. What if it's wrong? How do I know if it's wrong? How do I know if I can trust it? The other piece that I had to deal with is the fact that security is a spectrum. And we know that. I think we inherently know that frankly, an app is only as secure as the time of day that you're looking at it and who's looking at it and who's asking the questions, right? I was making trade-offs about the app's performance specifically because I needed to get it out the door quickly. And security was one of the first things that I had to make trade-offs about. I was okay with the 6-character password so long as it was hashed correctly in the database. I was okay with making sure that my session cookies were being transmitted over HTTPS, but I also had to make a trade-off in terms of the length of the session. Those are the things that I was looking at. So, in general, one of the things that I found after doing this experiment is that the way that I communicate with developers and my technology partners has changed 100%. This was a transformative exercise for me to do. And I would say that if you're struggling with feeling like you can't really, that people aren't getting it, I would say try something like this. You don't have to code. You don't have to go off and build a thing like I built, but go write a story, go write a scenario, and maybe take someone to lunch and say, hey, how would we work through this to make it secure, right? For me, it worked out really well because I was able to start talking to developers in language and in terms that they understand that resonate with them. So I talk to them more often, and what we talk about is of higher quality. Because of that, we've been able to actually create, I think, a relationship, a really trust-built relationship. So that way, when I tell them that something is really, really bad and we need to fix it and not do that, and probably we need to make sure that we have a way to check on whether or not someone is modifying the controls, they trust me when I say it. And when it's a high finding, it's a high finding. They also know that I'm not going to bullshit them and bring them garbage. So across the board, the findings closure rate of the products that I consult on has certainly improved. All right. So recommendations. I've already said this. I think that we all sort of inherently know it, but to secure the business, you have to know the business. And I think inherently it comes down to 3 things. Protect the customer. And I will tell you, I said at the beginning, Target is learned its lesson like 1,000-fold. With every conversation that we have with developers, with product managers, with business analysts, our very first question is, how is this going to impact our guests? So our first priority is to protect, not affect, protect the customer to the greatest extent possible. And that really, if you're getting pushback from folks that you work with, development teams, that's where I start with. Is this going to hurt our customer in any way? If it's not, then let's talk about how we can do what you want to do in a way that's going to be safe. Our next priority is to protect the roadmap. And what I mean by that is that I'd like to see us in security start getting more creative about how we can contribute to the success of the product and not just come in after the fact and throw on bolt-on things and hope that, eventually a product manager will care about it enough to actually make it happen. It doesn't work that way. As a product manager, I'm telling you, I'm working on things that are growing my customer base. I'm not necessarily have security front of mind. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It starts with asking questions. Even if you think it's a silly question, ask a question. Because what I find a lot of times is that somebody's made a decision in some room, in some meeting someplace, and or maybe sitting in somebody's email somewhere, and it's never made it out to the larger audience that actually has to enforce it, that actually has to deal with it, the consequences from it, and actually has to understand what happens with that data and how we destroy it, how we handle it, all those things. But it starts with saying, hey, you're the product manager on this product. Can you tell me what your philosophy is on security? And hey, this is the security person on this product. What decisions have been made? What's coming up? And how can we make sure that our customers are looking at security in a way that's intuitive and native and that it's not painful to them, right? Especially as we talk about things like design. And I'd be happy to talk with you more about this offline, but as we talk about things like design, we have to figure out a way to make it intuitive and native. So being able to, you can be that bridge between your product owner and your security person if it doesn't seem like they're talking, right? That's where you can actually be that relationship builder. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say one of the things that I always have to make sure that I understand and I reconcile is that not everybody knows what I know as a security person. So the thing that's obvious to me to go do and to go turn on or turn off or not flip that button, sometimes it's about saying the thing that you think is obvious in front of everybody. And even if they roll their eyes and they're like, oh yeah, okay, Susan, thanks. All right. Like, say it out loud and make sure everyone goes, yes, we got it. Because eventually someone's going to be, wait, what? Why? Wait, we did that? That was the plan? What happens with that? Part of it is just getting the conversation going and saying, hey, this is what I think is going to make the best user experience in order to not just protect our guests, not just protect our customers, but also to grow our business, right? If you're in a company, you're a stakeholder in that company. You are. And you know, I don't know where you work, but I assume that you want to do a good job. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I assume you want to do a good job. And so they pay you for your opinion. They pay all of us for our opinions. So when you stand up and say, whatever it is that we're about to do, let's make sure that it's helping everybody and it's protecting our customers, right? That should not fall on deaf ears. And if it does, then there's something else going on there between security as well as a product. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you. All right. And the last little bit I would say is protect the pipeline. I will tell you that this is the part that I still find challenging today. Because when I say protect the pipeline, I'm talking about anything that touches the product generation process, including design, including developers, including the supply chain, including the laptops that you're working on, including the GCP, including Fastly and your POPs and your CDNs. Everything that touches the process of building product, from your business analyst to your developer, all the way out to the actual customer that is using it, they're part of the pipeline. And what I tell my developers when I work with them is that build as much pipeline as you can afford to protect, because that's what I'm going to go look at. That's what when you tell me, is it secure? I'm going to ask you, how big is the pipeline and where is it that the data is coming from? And how are we destroying that data? How are we handling that data? And how are we making sure that the right folks have access to that data? Only build as much pipeline as you can afford to protect. The other piece of this that I find that, and this is a security-ism, is that we use the word just a lot. Just don't collect that data. Just turn that off. Just run this firewall rule. That's not possible. I mean, I don't like to say the word never, but when we use that word just, what it does is that it alienates us further from our technology and product teams, as well as it minimizes it and sort of marginalizes the decisions that have been made from people that maybe didn't have all the information. So when we say just turn off this thing, just have a 18-character password, yeah, we can say that, but that someone has to go do that work, and we can't minimize what that takes to do that. All right. So please assume that I'm also including UX in this conversation. Okay? In terms of working with developers, what I have found most successful and what has helped me the most is avoiding the Oogie Boogie dance. Does anyone know what the Oogie Boogie dance is? Jason's partly doing it, yeah. Oogie Boogie dance is where you come and you make shit up, right, in order to get somebody to do what you want. Where there's a hacker and he's gonna come and he's got a hoodie and he's gonna step in your computer, right? That's the Oogie Boogie dance. And I find that if you want to build credibility, you have to talk about what's real. And this is about building credibility and building relationships and making sure that people can trust you when you actually are saying that this is a problem, right? So avoid the Oogie Boogie dance and talk about what matters to the product. Your burp scanners and your Zap proxies and all these things are going to spit out a lot of scary things and say, oh my God, it's a critical finding. Oh, holy shit, drop everything. It's a 5-alarm fire, right? And I'm sorry if I'm cursing. It's Saturday. But remember that your tools don't have your context. Your tools don't know that you have a web application firewall turned on. They don't know that you have antivirus. They don't know that there's all these other things that might be in place. And so when you see that high finding, before you go and run off and say, hey, you need to go drop this and fix it, please keep in mind that it is in context with the entirety of your platform and of your ecosystem before you start characterizing risk. In terms of working with business partners, I would say you got to make friends with your product owners and your UX designers out there, because they're going to decide what goes on the roadmap ultimately. And we have to be able to define risk in terms of what matters to them. All right. So if you are interested in learning more and just leveling up your skills and starting to, build a dictionary and a lexicon, there's a couple of Udemy courses I'd recommend. One of them is specifically basically Business 101, where they talk about things like cost of goods. They talk about things like customer acquisition and those things. And there's another course if you're, not so much on the product side, or on the engineering side, but you want to be able to talk about things like stories and requirements and themes and epics. Being able to talk the language of how product is built is also going to be really helpful. Okay. We have a couple minutes left. If you want to reach out to me at any of these mechanisms, you can feel free to fight me there. You can fight me here. I'll fight you anywhere. But this has been really fun. I enjoyed myself. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Yes, sir. When? Where? It'll be on Speaker Deck, and I'll send a link to the NolaCon folks. Okay? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Well, I think one way that you could do that, so what I find is just honestly being in the room. And you know this from what you work on all the time, right? Sometimes just showing up gives you that level of credibility, right? You can't always walk in and be like, oh, hey, I'm going to be part of your Scrum team now. Tell me all the things, give me a story to work on. But I will tell you, the folks that I work with, I started showing up and sitting in the break room, and they finally turned and said, hey, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm just listening in and hearing what stories you're telling, and I'm your security person. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to help out, right? And that evolved, and they were like, you don't have to sit in the break room. We can get you a seat. And now they've gotten me a permanent seat, right? And it's one of those things where, for me, I wear that as a badge of honor because, when I would show up before, it would be like, oh, security's here, we're in trouble. Security's here, something we screwed up. Oh man, right? The other piece of it is getting management buy-in. So even your initial management to say, hey, I'd like to go shadow the folks over in the business analyst world for a week or so, right? If you can make a good case for it, if you can identify how that's going to ultimately make security better, I think that you have a really good chance of making that happen. Yes, ma'am. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. And at Target, one of the things that we do is so security is built into, has an OKR for our digital teams. So we have everybody that has to have what we call a product intelligence score above 700 out of 850. And what that really measures is, are we turning findings around on time? Are we seeing things like cross-site scripting? Are we seeing things like SQLI? Are we seeing that we have people that are completing their awareness training, and that we're cutting down on phishing and things like that? So being able to gamify it, as Jason said, is another way that we could do it too. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. One of the big things that you'll find in engineering, and there's an article from IBM that was done about 10 years ago about the idea of prevention versus cure, right? It costs more to fix something in production versus when it's still on the developer's laptop, right? Right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm happy to talk with you offline. I do think that one of the things that an action that you can immediately take is really in how you couch it and how you phrase it, right? If it sounds like, hey, I need you to give me some money just in case something happens, that's probably not going to go the way we want it to go, right? But being able to say, hey, your revenue goal is 10 million. Buying this firewall right now is going to get you to 10 million sooner, right? If you can tell that story, if that's the narrative that you can actually play out, then yeah. All right. I think that's it for me. Again, feel free to reach out to me. That's what I got. Thanks, y'all.